If you've been reading DC Comics' Dark Crisis Young Justice series from Megan Fitzmartin, you'll know she takes hate to another level. She makes the writers on the She-Hulk series seem pretty tame by comparison. Just the amount of vitriol that she likes to spit at fans who have been supporting DC Comics for decades at this point, following their favorite characters, just trashing them every single chance she gets. And in my opinion, now that we've gotten to Dark Crisis Young Justice number 5, the fact that this was okayed is a really big issue for DC Comics. In fact, I don't ever call for people to be fired from Marvel or DC Comics. As far as I'm concerned, that's what Jim Lee, CB Cebulski, and the leadership teams of those companies are in place for. But they certainly should consider firing executive editor Ben Abernathy, as well as editor Dave Wielgoss, after their performance on Dark Crisis Young Justice series, and okaying what Megan Fitzmartin has put on paper and having the temerity to charge people why you're insulting them. I'm not hoping it happens, but if Ben Abernathy and Dave Wielgoss's names come up on the chopping block during this round of layoffs at DC Comics, I'm not going to shed a tear. You can only insult the customers of DC Comics so many times, and specifically the fans of Young Justice themselves. Obviously here we're talking about Tim Drake, Connor Kent, and Bart Allen. At some point there needs to be repercussions for your actions, for turning people away, for telling readers, people that are paying your salaries, it's time for you to walk away and stop supporting the characters in the DC Comics universe. What am I talking about? This page specifically is what people are going to be talking about when it comes to Dark Crisis Young Justice number 5. We see Mickey Mitzelplick, a new character created by Megan Fitzmartin, basically telling everyone paying for this comic book how she really feels about them and what they've had to say about her work, most likely regarding Tim Drake and retconning the character's sexuality. Haven't you noticed? You have been replaced with people who don't have any right to be here. I'm sorry, I don't care about these guys. Going on adventures, giving us stories that we didn't ask for. Why can't it go back to when we were younger? You three were the heroes that meant the most to me in my childhood, and I never get to see you anymore. You're either killed, removed from the timelines, or just forgotten about while these morons take your moments. Ingrates who haven't had to work as hard as you, and I'm sick of it. This entire comic book is nothing but 24 pages of cringy dialogue, nonsensical plot points, queer baiting, and really bad meta commentary. The fact that Megan Fitzmartin, who to my knowledge only has 15 comic book writing credits in her entire career, and most of those comic books were short stories in Batman Urban Legends, they weren't full comic book stories, feels like she's entitled to this platform to disparage the people that have been supporting this publisher for years, when you can tell she's not a DC Comics fan. She's never been one of us. She's never been a Young Justice fan. She's been destroying the characters left and right ever since she got her hands on them. Obviously, the biggest one is Tim Drake and the retconning of the character's sexuality. She just decides one day Tim Drake and Bernard are somehow interested in each other now, even though we've got over 30 years of history with Tim Drake. We don't have a whole lot of history with Bernard because he was just a side character, and we know who the character is. And then she makes this enormous change to the character, and any response, any feedback that says, you know what, that doesn't fit for Tim Drake, means that we're just a bunch of ingrates and worthy of scorn in the pages of the comic books that we're actually paying for. Now let's break it down piece by piece and blow some holes in Megan Fitzmartin's story here and explain why we know without a shadow of a doubt she's not a DC Comics fan, and she certainly doesn't like Young Justice or the history of DC Comics. Haven't you noticed you've been replaced with people who don't have any right to be here? Every character featured in this page, including Alan Scott, whose first appearance was in 1940, has recently had their sexuality retconned or recently been created for the sole purpose of LGBT representation. The only characters we don't actually know about here are Jace Fox and Yara Flor, and I assume that this basically confirms that they are LGBT representative characters now. You can tell that Megan Fitzmartin, Jim Lee, Dave Wielgoss, Ben Abernathy, Marie Javins, nobody at DC Comics are actually listening to what people are saying. Fans want characters, not caricatures. Stop creating characters for the sole purpose of being LGBT representative. You don't get to create a new bisexual character or a new gay character or a new non-binary character and expect people to automatically like the characters. You actually have to do something to flesh them out. You have to do something to give them a purpose in the DC Comics universe, i.e. they need to be superheroes first. That ball has been dropped so many times over the past 5 years by DC Comics and their writers, it's not even funny. Megan Fitzmartin is probably one of the worst examples of this with Tim Drake. The only place you can find a Tim Drake story that features him being a superhero right now in DC Comics is in Batman by Chip Zdarsky, who's actually doing a pretty damn good job with the character. A lot of people like Tim Drake. they feel like he's probably the best suited character to take over the mantle of Batman if he ever retires, or maybe if he actually dies in the DC Comics universe. Tim Drake has a ton of potential, and it's all been destroyed by Megan Fitzmartin, so she could say that she was the one that created the first gay Robin character. Well, congratulations. People know who you are now, but it's for destroying characters, and it's for series like this because they are abominations to DC Comics, and the fact that they're being published means it's time to start cleaning house in DC Comics, and David Zaslav can't get started on that soon enough. I'm sorry, I don't care about these guys. Going on adventures and giving us stories we didn't ask for, why can't it go back to when we were younger? You three were the heroes that meant the most to my childhood, and I never get to see you anymore. That right there tells you everything you need to know about Megan Fitzmartin and her awareness of the DC Comics universe, and these three characters in particular. The fans aren't the ones that said, DC Comics, you need to stop the character progression of Connor Kent, Bart Allen, and Tim Drake. The fans of Young Justice would like to see these characters grow. They would like to see these characters be used more, but DC Comics themselves, every time they have a new editorial mandate or reboot in their universe, they end up de-aging the characters, making them go away, but they also introduce new characters that are basically just variants of these characters in particular. What's the point of having Tim Drake in the universe if you're going to have Damian Wayne as well be the other Robin, the one that's actually related to Batman, the one most likely to be featured in the stories? They keep making the characters redundant, they keep aging them down, and they keep wiping out their history every time the characters start to progress. DC Comics fans, Young Justice fans, are the ones that have been screaming from the rooftops, please do something with these characters. Let them age up. They need to take the next step. They need to get their own superhero mantles and do something with these characters that makes them special and unique in the DC Comics universe. DC Comics are the ones doing this, not the fans. But Megan Fitzmartin doesn't know that because she's not a DC Comics reader. She's not a DC Comics fan. She's never been a part of these discussions. She hasn't been around here the last decade or 20 years when we've been talking about this the entire time. You're either killed, removed from the timeline, or just forgotten about while these morons take your moments. Ingrates who haven't had to work as hard as you, and I'm sick of it. I think that's how many comic book fans, DC and Marvel alike, see today's crop of comic book writers. They don't pay their dues, they don't love the characters, they don't love the universes, they don't know the history, they hate the fans. No other comic book series produced in the past 5 years exemplifies that more than Megan Fitzmartin's Dark Crisis Young Justice. If you were to go to imdb.com and type in Megan Fitzmartin and look at her writing credits, you'll see that she was an executive assistant to one of the producers, I believe, on Supernatural for about 3 or 4 years. Of course, it was the 3 or 4 years when Supernatural was really bad. But she wasn't writing on that series. She was going and getting coffee. She was keeping that guy's schedule and stuff like that. She has a couple of writing credits here or there. I think 2 of them are on the DC Superhero Girls show. But other than that, she hasn't done much of anything outside of comics to really warrant a big gig at DC Comics. She certainly hasn't done anything during her time at DC Comics to warrant a position on a big event book like this. This is one of the big tie-ins to Dark Crisis that's leading to the next big reboot. Megan Fitzmartin hasn't paid her dues. She hasn't proven herself in the market. She can't write comic book stories. All she can do is insult fans and make wild changes to characters and then get upset when people say, you know what? I've actually been reading about this character for 30 years now, and what you just did doesn't work within the scope of the DC Comics universe and history. Yet somehow in this, we're the bad guys, right? We're the ones that are entitled because we're the ones paying money and expect some type of quality associated with the comic book. And the worst thing about all of this is in the end, apparently it's not over, there's one issue left, but by the time we get to the end of this issue, she has to make these characters look like complete dipshits once again. Because the real Cassie finally shows up, and she has to treat the 3 male heroes like complete morons. Because that's what Megan Fitzmartin thinks about these characters, and you and I, the fans. The only morons I can think of right now are the editors at DC who actually okayed this book. The people at DC who hired Megan Fitzmartin are the biggest jackasses in the room, without a doubt. And if you're hoping by the time this is all over, enter Tim Drake's series, which is sure to be canceled in less than 8 issues, that maybe Megan Fitzmartin won't be allowed to do anything with these characters anymore, you have another thing coming. She's been planting the seeds to fuck with the fans and tell you you're the biggest piece of shit in the world, to use fantagonism to get a reaction out of you and me so she can call us ingrates and claim that she's the victim here. Recently, she was asked about this particular panel. This was the question. During the DC Pride Tim Drake special #1, there's a moment where Tim and Connor Kent are holding hands. So the question is, are you trying to electrocute Twitter? This is what Megan Fitzmartin had to say. That's definitely something that I've heard about and am aware of, and it will be more of a discussion point in later issues of certain comic brands that are happening right now. Because Megan Fitzmartin's time at DC Comics is not about entertaining. It's not about taking these wonderful characters and this universe and this awesome history that is available to her and telling the best story possible. It's about fantagonism. It's about letting you and I know how much she hates us so much. It's the weirdest thing in the world, the headspace that a lot of creators at DC and Marvel in right now, to where the primary purpose of what they're writing in these universes is to tell you and I that they hate us so very much. And that leads us to a simple question. If DC and Marvel Comics hate their fans and their universe so much, why should we care about any of this? Why should we keep supporting these companies? I talked about this about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer. If they hate their own characters and universes, why shouldn't the fans just hate them too? If you can't see here, there's also a link in the video description.